I am Sujal Shah, Chartered Accountant. Part of mergers and acquisition subject, the topic allotted to me is valuation. Friends, valuation is a subject which is very important, mainly from transaction point of view, because valuation is the heart of any transaction, whether it is purchase of shares, business sale, business purchase, or transfer of an intangible. Valuation carries an immense importance in view of the fact that the ultimate consideration being discharged between seller and buyer is determined based on the valuation of the asset being transferred. Asset could be in the form of a shares or a business or any other asset like intangibles or a contract, etc. The valuer basically tries to work out what is the worth of the asset. Being a chartered accountant, our role is mainly hovering around financial valuation of the assets. We generally do not take part in the technical valuation of the asset. The technical valuation is generally carried out by engineers or real estate consultants. Our role as a chartered accountant is mainly to do the financial evaluation of the asset. Now friends, one must understand that when you do a valuation, three things you have to keep in mind is the purpose for which the valuation is being called for. So one must understand why the valuation is being attempted. Is it attempted because there is a purchase or sale transaction? Is it attempted because an internal assessment is required by the owners to understand the worth of the asset, or it is required because of some statutory obligations in the form of a high court requirement or a transfer pricing requirement or the requirement by the regulatory authorities. So once you know the purpose of the valuation, the second important aspect to understand is the date of the valuation. That means on which date you are doing a valuation. Are you doing a valuation as of 31st March 2014, or you are doing valuation as of 30th September 2014, or you are doing a valuation of the current date, that is say 25th November 2014. So one must understand what is the date on which you are carrying out the valuation, because certain aspects in the valuation has a implication if the date is different. For example, if you are working out a valuation of a company, the liabilities which are outstanding on a particular day are important to be known because that is the liability which will get reduced from the enterprise value, and finally the equity value will be worked out. So the valuation date is a very important date to understand. Third aspect which in a valuation one has to keep in mind, that valuation may vary from a situation to situation. For example, if one is doing a valuation for an amalgamation, the entire focus of the valuer will be to work out the relative values of the two companies. For example, if Park Davis is merging with Pfizer, the valuer in the case of the amalgamation will do a valuation of Park Davis, will do a valuation of Pfizer, and then suggest that what should be the recommended ratio for the amalgamation. Whereas if the valuation is required for a standalone transaction, suppose Park Davis shares were to be acquired by Pfizer, in that case the valuation of Park Davis on a standalone basis will be relevant. Absolute value in that case is more relevant. Whereas in case valuation is attempted for an amalgamation, relative values of the two companies are more relevant. So these three aspects once you keep in mind, the entire exercise will begin from there. Now before we go into various methodologies of valuation, let us first understand what are the different circumstances under which the valuation is being attempted. So let me start again with an example of a merger. If two companies are merging with each other and consideration is being discharged by issue of shares of transferee company to the transferor company shareholders, valuation will be required for both the companies. Suppose it is a demerger, that means an undertaking is being demerged into another legal entity. In that case, again, if the undertaking is being transferred to a shell company, that means the company which has no other activity, and a mirror image is being contemplated, in that case valuation of that undertaking may not be required. However, a valuer may be called upon to give an entitlement ratio recommendation to the board of directors. Third requirement could be buyback of shares or a purchase or sale of a business. Many a times we have seen in the recent era that instead of buying a share of the company and taking it over in entirety, it is a common practice for the acquirer to only buy the business on a slump sale basis. So in that case, the acquirer is not taking over the entire company, it does a cherry picking of the business of the company. So suppose a company has two businesses, cement and say pharmaceutical, and the acquirer is interested only in pharmaceutical business. In that case, the business of pharmaceutical is picked up from that company and it is acquired by the company and housed in his own company, that is on a slump sale basis. In that case, business has to be valued, not the entire share capital. Another instance of valuation being required could be on account of an IPO being contemplated or an FPO, that is follow-on public offer, is being contemplated. Many times private equities enter the company with certain investments. In that case, the promoter of the company may want to take your guidance to do the valuation. Very important area of practice in the recent times which is getting developed is an area called purchase price allocation. So if a business is bought over by the acquirer at say consideration of 100 crores, now acquirer for accounting in its own books, this 100 crore has to be debited to various assets and liabilities it acquired out of this transaction. So for which an accountant is called to allocate the 100 crores to various asset groups. Now asset could be in the form of tangible assets, assets could be in the form of intangible assets. Intangible assets could be brands, copyrights, drawings, technical know-how, etc. Tangible assets could be plant and machinery, land, building, furniture fixtures, computers, etc. So there are two parts of purchase price allocation. One is the allocation of value to the tangible assets, which again, as I mentioned, could be carried out by the technical valuer, and there could be an allocation of value to the intangible assets, in which case the chartered accountants are called upon to value those intangibles which travelled with the business, and the acquirer records those intangibles at the value recommended by the chartered accountant. Generally, the auditors of the acquiring company also insist for a third party evaluation of such intangibles. In that case, chartered accountants are called upon to do the valuation of intangibles. Another important area which is emerging in the recent times is the impairment of various assets. Now, impairment testing is done when you are holding an asset and at the end of the year, say on the balance sheet date, an impairment test is required, and generally it is triggered from the discussion with the auditors, and if auditors insist, they carry out they insist the company to carry out a fair valuation of the asset. Now asset could be in the form of shares which the company is holding, or many times it is certain operating assets also. Another area which in the recent times has gathered momentum is the valuation for private equity funds. That means if private equity fund has invested say $100 in say 10 scripts, that means their basket comprises of those 10 investments which has costed them $100. At regular intervals, either 6 months basis or a yearly basis, the management of the private equity initiates a valuation exercise for their internal reporting to the investments. So it is possible that after the investment is carried out in those 10 companies, at the end of say 1 or 2 years, the value of those $100 investment could be $120 or it could be $80 depending on the performance of the underlying companies. Again, to determine the value of that basket of 10 investments, chartered accountants are called to do the valuation for the entire basket of the private equity investors. It is a repetitive practice, and many times it is a requirement of the investment committees of those private equity funds to do a valuation on a periodic basis, quarterly, half yearly or a yearly basis. Another important trigger point for valuation could be litigation. Litigation could be between the brothers, litigation could be between the two joint venture partners, litigation could be with an investor, a silent investor who is not otherwise active in the operations of the company. So again, in such cases when there are litigations, we have seen that many a times the regulator or the court insist for a third party valuation, independent valuation, and then that becomes the basis for the settlement between the parties who are litigating. Many a times we have seen even family separation issues. The valuers are called upon to do a valuation of various assets owned by the family. Again, there could be a requirement of a technical valuation and also a financial valuation if the assets are spread across various category of items. In the recent times, for Reserve Bank of India, there are valuations required when there is a transfer of shares between resident and non-resident, or vice versa. So there is a requirement for you to do valuation using internationally accepted methodologies. Again, a growing area of practice with lots of volume, but one has to be extremely careful while doing valuations, because based on your valuation, the amount is determined at which rate the transaction will take place between resident and non-resident. So one has to be extremely careful when you are issuing such reports. Looking at various issues for which valuations are called upon, let us now move back to a very important step in the valuation about various processes followed by a valuer when he gets such assignment. So first and foremost, he has to obtain information for the valuation. That means all the relevant information such as the audited accounts of the company, the financial projections for the future years, details about contingent liabilities, details about surplus assets, details about various borrowings which the company have done, details about the business per se in terms of what are the various businesses and what are the different growth prospects of those businesses. So all these aspects in the form of information packet is obtained from the client by the valuer. Once the data is received, the valuer will do the analysis of data, and after the analysis he will have discussion with the management of the company about various points which he comes across seeing the data. So till this time it is basically a back office work, but thereafter it goes into the front work where you meet the client, tell him your concerns that in his projections these are the issues you are facing, and thereafter the data is settled. Then the next important step for the valuer is to decide what are the different methodologies of valuation which the valuer is going to adopt for that particular exercise. We will see going forward what are the different methodologies, but this is one of the important steps in doing a valuation, because depending on the methodology you select, your data requirement may also change. For example, if you are doing a valuation using discounted cash flow method, you will need future projections. For any reason, if future projections are not available, you have no choice but to fall back on the historical results. And there you can use the historical methods of valuation such as EBITDA multiple method or a price to earning multiple method. Depending on the method you select, you will have to seek the data from the client. So it is very important that at that stage valuer decides what are the methodologies which he wants to apply for doing the valuation. After doing this selection of method and obtaining various data, it is important for the valuer to understand what are the important ingredients of the valuation. That means which are the factors which are materially affecting the valuation. In some cases, like a service industry, it could be the cost of human resources, which could be a material item of importance, or in case of a manufacturing company, it could be the cost of raw material, which is very relevant. Depending on the industry you are valuing and the company you are valuing, you need to carry out certain sensitivities to the data. That means if for example, if you assume that for a particular exercise raw material to turnover ratio is say 65%. By just tweaking it to 1%, what is the impact on the overall projections? Once you see that, you will realize whether that item is a material item or an immaterial item. If it is material item, you need to be extremely careful in those projections and those data review, because a slight change in the assumptions could materially change the ultimate analysis or ultimate conclusions. Once you do valuation using various methods, the next step is to assign weightages to different methods. And once we assign different weightages, and as we go forward, I will also explain you that how the weights are being assigned to various methods of valuation. Thereafter, the valuer will finally recommend that what according to him or in his opinion is the fair value of the business or the share. Once he concludes that this is the fair value in his opinion, he will issue a report to the client. Now friends, here one has to understand that when you do a valuation exercise, it is not a certification job. That means your conclusion paragraph will not state that we hereby certify that the valuation of this company is so and so. The valuation exercise is ultimately an expression of an opinion. So ultimately your conclusion paragraph will say, in our opinion, the fair value of the share is rupees so and so. So it is an expression of an opinion, so you should take enough care while drafting the valuation report not to give an impression to the reader that this is a certification job. It is very much possible that if I do a valuation and I come across a result of say 100 rupees per share, my dear friend of another valuer will always come out with a different value. He may say this fair value is according to him is 105 rupees a share, or somebody else may say it is 95 rupees a share. So it is very much possible that two valuers doing a valuation of the same company comes out with different results. That is why it is an expression of an opinion and not a certification job. So please take care when you issue a report on valuation not to say that this is a certificate, it is an opinion, so it's a report. Now let us look at various methods of valuation which are being adopted. If I go back to the history, that means say in the year 1991 I cleared chartered accountancy exam, and as it happens the Indian economy at that time just opened up. So the various mergers and acquisition transactions were happening at that point of time, and at that time when one was doing a valuation, the more focus was on the net assets method of the company, earnings multiple method, which was mainly PE multiple method, and if the share was a listed share, it was a market price method. As we traveled, the more different methods started becoming more active. One of the most important method in the recent time which has emerged is the EBITDA multiple method. It is also known as comparable companies multiple method. Another method, important method of valuation is the market price method, where if the shares of the company you are valuing is a listed share, you will look at say a 3 months or 6 months market price average and arrive at the value under the market price method. Very quickly let us go through each method and understand how it is being carried out. I will be not very elaborate, but I will briefly explain you how these different methods are being worked out. Let us start with net assets method. Under the net assets method, the valuer will determine what are the values of assets which are the subject matter of valuation. So if I am valuing a share of a company, I will look at the fixed assets, net current assets, borrowings, and I will do a simple exercise of adding the assets and reducing the liabilities to arrive at the net worth of the company. Now when you arrive at a net worth of the company, it is also equivalent to book value of the share, book value per share of the company. There are certain adjustments which one valuer will do. Adjustments could be on account of surplus assets which the company is holding. That means apart from operating assets, if the company is holding certain surplus land which is not being used for its operation, then the market value of that surplus asset is being captured on a net of tax basis if there is an appreciation, and added to the value of the asset, the appreciation portion. If there are contingent liabilities, that means there are some claims against the company which are not acknowledged as debt, or it is under some litigation. In those cases, the valuer may apply certain probability to those contingent liabilities and also reduce it from the net assets value. If the company which is being valued is holding certain investment in the shares of another company, the valuer will then do a valuation of that investee company and impute the value based on the percentage holding of the holding company in that investee company. So suppose a company is holding 50% share capital of another company, say X Limited, and the X Limited's value is say 50 crores. Since the company which is being valued is holding 50%, 25 crores of that will be added to the value of the investment after removing the book value. Again, if there are tax implication, you add this appreciation on a net of tax basis. Some other adjustments which a valuer will do to the net assets method could be if there are, say, outstanding warrants or ESOPs in the company. You will, depending on the circumstances, you will add the value which is receivable on account of these outstanding instruments and divide the total value by the diluted equity capital to arrive at the adjusted value per share. So these are some of the adjustments which valuer will carry out while doing the net assets method. Other variation of net assets method could be the realizable value of assets. So in the first example, what I did was only the book value I took, and only for surplus assets one took the market price method, market price of those surplus assets, and arrive at an adjusted net asset value of the company. In the realizable value method, you will obtain the realizable value of each segment of the assets, and you will arrive at the liquidation or a realizable value of the company and arrive at the per share value accordingly. Another variation of net asset method could be the remainder replacement value. That means if the plant is already used for 10 years and if the total life of the plant is say 20 years, in that case the valuer will arrive at the current value of that plant, and after removing the period which is already gone, for the remainder life what is the value that is being worked out. Again, in such method you will have to take serious help of a technical valuer, because what you are doing is also looking at the technical valuation of the assets and then adjusting it for the life which is already elapsed. Both realizable value and remainder replacement value has a limited significance in the current scenario. In fact, the whole net asset method has a very limited usage in the current scenario unless you are valuing a investment company. Otherwise, in most of the operating company, more stress is given to the earnings based method or a market price method, because to an extent net asset method throws a value which is like a bottom value or the bare minimum value which the seller will expect if the transaction is happening. The second basket of valuation methods is earnings based methodologies. Now earnings based methodologies could be EBITDA multiple method, which is the comparable companies multiple method, or it could be price earning multiple method, or many times we have seen in the recent times there are companies being valued on the turnover multiple basis. In the most recent valuation methodology which got developed maybe in the last decade is the discounted cash flow method. Again, it is based on the earnings or the cash flow of the company being valued. Let us very briefly understand what are these different methodologies. So if I may start with turnover multiple method, which is in the current times mainly used to value retail companies, because retail companies in the initial period are bleeding. They do not have profits to which a multiplier could be applied. So a better way a valuer found out is to apply a turnover multiple to such companies and then arriving at the enterprise value of such companies. So for example, in the retail company, if the ideal multiple is say 2 to 2.5 times of the turnover, for example, in that case the retail company which is being valued is is valued using the turnover into 2.5 times to arrive at the enterprise value. In the practical life, turnover multiple method is more used as the back of the envelope rechecking of the value under different methods rather than being used as the main valuation methodology. Second method is the EBITDA multiple method or comparable companies multiple method, which is one and the same, different nomenclatures are being used. Here the attempt by the valuer is to arrive at the maintainable level of EBITDA, and then the multiplier to that is being applied. The multiplier being applied is worked out using the multiplier enjoyed by the comparable listed companies. So if I am valuing a software company and say the comparable company to that software company is Infosys, TCS, in that case I will see what are the EBITDA multiples which are being enjoyed by TCS and Infosys, and for example if it comes to 15, in that case I may make certain adjustments to that 15. If the size of the company which you are valuing is different than the companies which you have picked up for arriving at the multiple, and after making those adjustments you will apply those multiple to the EBITDA of the company being valued to arrive at the enterprise value. Now when you apply a multiplier to the EBITDA, what you are arriving at is a value which is called enterprise value. That means it is the value for all the fund providers, because you are applying a multiplier to the EBITDA. Interest is added back. In that case, this is the value for all fund providers, including equity shareholders, the debt providers and preference shareholders. So to that extent, you will have to remove from the enterprise value the amount payable to the debt providers and the preference shareholders to arrive at the equity shareholders value. Again, same adjustment which we discussed to the net assets method are also applied in to the comparable companies multiple method also. While arriving at the maintainable EBITDA, the valuer may use multiple years EBITDA and average it. Valuer may apply weightages to certain EBITDA and then arrive at a maintainable level of EBITDA. The choice is entirely left to the valuer, that what the valuer feels is the maintainable level of EBITDA. When the company is growing, the recent years of EBITDA is generally given a higher importance because that's the most recent result of the company and it is in the growing phase. Similar to EBITDA multiple method is also the traditional price to earning multiple, where a multiplier is applied to the maintainable profit after tax. In earlier method it was the multiple which was applied to the EBITDA, whereas in this case it is the multiplier which is applied to the EBITDA. To the profit after tax, and the multiplier which is applied is the price earning ratio or PE ratio, which is commonly known in the marketplace, to arrive at the straight equity value of the company. Since you are applying a multiplier to the profit after tax, what you arrive at is straight the equity value of the company. Again here, after applying the multiplier to the profit after tax, you make certain adjustments like surplus assets, contingent liabilities, ESOPs or warrants, and then arrive at an adjusted value under this method. In all these methods, when you arrive at the equity value, you need to divide it by the outstanding number of shares to arrive at the per share value, because your client may want to understand what is the per share value. He may not be very much interested in knowing what's the total value of the company, because he may be transacting only few shares. So many a times the scope of the valuer is to give per share value and not the entire company valuation. Of course, it is derived from the total valuation of the company. The most important in the recent time, and which has gathered lot of acceptability, is the discounted cash flow method. In discounted cash flow method, unlike other methods where earnings in the form of EBITDA or profit after tax or the turnover is being captured to do the valuation, under the discounted cash flow method, what is relevant is the cash flow which the business is generating. So in that case, you arrive at the free cash flow which the business can generate. And when I say free cash flow, how is it calculated? You arrive at the EBITDA, remove the tax from that, remove the capital expenditure needs of the company, also take into account the incremental working capital requirement of the company, and then arrive at the free cash flow which is applicable to the company. Once you arrive at the free cash flow for different projected years, the discounted cash flow method is entirely based on the projections of the company. So the starting point for the discounted cash flow method is the date of valuation, and then you go forward in time based on the projections which are provided to you by the management. Now when management provides the projections, the valuer is generally very critically probing the projections to make sure that the assumptions in the projections are reasonable and fair. For example, historically, if the company was having a raw material to turnover ratio of 65%, in the projected years, if the management of the company projects 55% to the turnover ratio for the raw materials, it can substantially improve the valuation and give a very high value to the share. The role of the valuer there could be to see whether this assumption from 65% to 55% is a fair assumption or it is just assumed because he wanted a higher value. That is where the valuer will have to be very vigilant in reviewing the assumptions underlying the projections. So whenever a projection is being provided to you, valuer's first job will be to see whether the projections are fair and reasonable or not, and at any stage if you feel those projections are aggressive or depressed, you need to discuss it out with the client and get it corrected. Because ultimately when the transaction will be carried out and if a regulator checks those calculations, they may question the valuer that how he accepted these different bases as compared to the historical experience of the raw material to turnovers. This is just an example. So this aspect one has to clearly understand. So having worked out the free cash flow for the future years, business is going to continue forever. So a perpetuity value is also added. That means if the projections are available for 5 years, you first arrive at the free cash flow for the 5 years and thereafter for the perpetuity using certain formulas. So the value for the explicit period of 5 years plus the value for perpetuity will give you the enterprise value. From the enterprise value, again here you will remove the loan liabilities or preference share liability which are not convertible. You will arrive at the value for equity shareholders. Of course, similar adjustments like value of investment, surplus assets, contingent liabilities will be carried out to in this method also. So discounted cash flow method in the recent times has gained substantial importance, so much so that our Reserve Bank of India as recently as 6 months back was asking to do valuation using only discounted cash flow method for any transfer of shares between resident and non-resident. So it is one of the most acceptable methods of valuation in the recent times. The third basket of valuation methodologies could be market price based methodologies, and when the shares of the company are listed, one values the company using the market price, that is a historical market price for a period of 3 years, 3 months or a 6 months average to arrive at the value per share under market price method. Now some of the important aspect when the valuer will look at when he works out value using different valuation methodologies is to apply the weightages to different methods. So ultimately your client would like to have a single method rather than having value under 3 different methods and he is being asked to do the ultimate conclusion. It is the duty of the valuer to give him one single valuation indication. So typically when a valuer carries out valuation using multiple methods, he assigns weightages to different methods. For example, you don't want to ignore the net asset value completely. In that case, you may give lower weightage to the net assets method and higher weightage to the earnings based method, because ultimately what is important is the going concern valuation. So on a earnings carries a higher importance as compared to the asset holding. Similarly, if you are valuing a company whose shares are listed, you may want to give a higher weightage to the market price also. So just to give you an example, you may give 20% weightage to the net assets method, 40% to the earnings based method and 40% to the market price method. So this is one example. Likewise, the valuer may use different weightages for different methods. Only care valuer has to take care is that when he is using different methodologies, he should have a justifiable reasons to convince an outsider that why he is applying different weightages to these different methods and what is his logic. Again, as I mentioned, he may have a logic which the reader may not agree, but ultimately it's an expression of opinion. So the valuer, when he will do the valuation, we should have a proper reasoning why he is applying different weightages to the methodologies which are being adopted. Just to give you certain flavors, like say if you are valuing a brand based company, say for example a company like Hindustan Unilever or Godrej, which are holding many brands, you may want to use earnings based method in combination with a market price method to arrive at the fair value of the share, and completely ignore the asset based valuation. If you are valuing a company which is under liquidation, in that case maybe the only method which is suitable is the asset based valuation. Or if you are valuing a property company which has only a piece of land and no other activity being envisaged, in that case the value of the land will determine the value, and hence the asset based method could be the appropriate method. So again, depending on the nature of the company which you are valuing, you may want to disregard certain methods or give a lower weightage to certain methods. Again friends, it is entirely left to the valuer to decide what weightages he wants to give to different methodologies, but as I mentioned, one has to have a convincing reasons why he is applying a particular weight to that particular method. Weightages should not be used to ultimately arrive at a particular value which the client wants. Weightages should be used what you are more convinced that why a particular method should get a higher or a lower weightages. Having understood different methodologies and how ultimately the final single value is being worked out, what I thought it may be useful for you friends to also understand what are the different opportunities for the professionals in this area. The opportunity could be in the form of helping a client to close a transaction. That means a client is buying a share of another company or selling his business. In that case, he may call upon you to help him in advising as to what is the ideal rate at which he should buy a company or sell that business. So particularly it is for transaction closure he will seek your help. The clients many a times will approach you to do a valuation because he wants it to submit it to a regulator. Regulator could be Securities and Exchange Board of India, the tax department, or maybe Reserve Bank of India, or any other regulator who wants the valuation. Say many times stamp duty department also wants a valuation of the company. So to that extent, valuer may be called upon to do valuation for meeting the regulatory requirements. Third could be for the compliance. Compliance could be because the auditor wants a valuation for the impairment testing, or it is because of the purchase price allocation, or many times it is required to comply with a certain law. In that case again you are called upon to do a compliance valuation. Many times valuation are just called for internal usages. I have seen so many instances where we are called upon to do valuation of only for internal assessment by the promoters. That means promoters wants to know that okay, having worked for 20 years and developed this company to this stage, he wants to know that what is the worth of the business which I have created over the period of time, and that is where he calls upon you to advise him on the valuation. Now what are the different, many times I am asked the question, what are the competence required for doing a valuation? Friends, basically having done the CA course, I think we have enough competence already in place to do the valuation exercise. However, certain added efforts if you do apart from your CA education in the form of reading lots of business magazines where you know what industry, what is it happening to a particular industry, is it having a growth or it is gone into stagnation. So more connect with the economy and more connect with the industry will help you to gain a better momentum when it comes to the valuation. Reading books on valuation, specific books which are available in the market, Our institute also has a publication on valuation. If you read that, then you will create a liking for this subject, and also when such work arrives at your doorstep, you will be able to do it more effectively. You should also, maybe when you want to go for this field, you should also develop your liking for the technology. Say many a times valuation, it is very important for you to know certain functions of Excel, because it will help you to do various analysis, it will help you to do certain conclusions. So you need to understand. However, a point of caution I want to say that when you use technology, use it, but don't lose your common sense. Don't use your grip on the numbers, which is what we are taught in our CA subject, that the grip on the numbers, we cannot completely rely and throw it on the technology to decide what will be the number. So whenever you use technology, you should not lose the grip on the final conclusion. So suppose if I change a multiplier of 7.5 to EBITDA to 8 to the EBITDA, I must know at the back of my mind what will be the ultimate impact of such change. That we should not blindly rely on the Excel files, because sometimes with a wrong formula or a wrong cell selection, you may completely get a different number. So that is very important, that rely on the technology, but don't become completely dependent on the technology. Another important aspect which it will help you is to read the latest newspapers, that what are the transactions happening, what structures the companies are using to arrive at a particular transaction, whether it's a sale of a share or it is sale of a business. Many times a cherry picking of only assets are done and not a slump sale of the business, because the acquirer is interested only a brand of the company, or many times acquirers are interested only in the land and building and plant and machinery, and business is left behind. So all these aspects, once you understand, you will have you will know how the client, how the outside world carries out transaction under different modes, and that's why when you are advising your clients, it will be helpful for you to see that what are the different options available to him and guide him in the best possible way. Now at the end, friends, I would like to tell you that to be a successful valuer, you need to develop certain qualities, and very briefly some of the points I will tell you. That many times when you are called upon to do valuation, you are thrown with some unreasonable timelines. We have seen some instances where you are given the data on Thursday evening and he wants a valuation on Monday morning. Now you should understand your capabilities in the form of the infrastructure available and also the manpower available, and then decide whether this kind of crazy timelines are possible or not. If you feel it's a very aggressive timeline and you will not be able to give the justice to the subject or the assignment, better to refrain from taking such assignments rather than taking it up and diluting on certain qualities of the work. So it is always better that when you are approached with a valuation and you understand the timeline requirement, you must accept it or reject it depending on your infrastructure and manpower availability. When you do a valuation, your arithmetical accuracy of the calculation is the most important thing. I think to a chartered accountant, I don't think so it is required to say that arithmetical accuracy is a must. But I am seeing in the recent times, because the new generation wants to completely rely on the technology, sometimes in the formula mistakes and sometimes the cell picking is different, so sometimes you end up having a different valuation. So your arithmetical accuracy and the accuracy of the data picking has to be extremely important. That is why when you do a valuation, it may be a good practice for you to get it also first internally checked by somebody who is not involved in the assignment. So if I am doing an assignment and if I have done the calculation, I will get it checked by somebody from my office first internally to make sure that I have not made any mistakes in the calculation and the data is picked up, the logics which I have used are reasonable. So there is a sort of a third party outsider also verifying your assumptions, verifying your data placements and then your conclusions, to make sure that you are not finalizing something which is completely unreasonable. It's called internal peer review. So internal peer review, I think as a practice, is extremely important in this line of activity. So make it a habit to have internal peer review being carried out before you give the workings to the clients. when you have a valuation practice, or when you develop this as a practice area, it is very important for you to spend some quality time with your colleagues on technical education. Every day new instruments are coming up, every day new structures are coming in place, every day new methods are being evolved, new assumptions are coming over. So you must know what is happening outside, and that's why regular internal training sessions are very important for you to make sure that your organization is also geared up to meet the current requirements. When you do a valuation of the company, and many times you will come across valuation of a listed company being asked from you, it is extremely important for you to have internal code of conduct in place, whereby none of the people who are involved directly or indirectly in the assignments trade in the stock when it is being under the blackout period, or when there is a transaction contemplated, because insider trading norms are very strict, and you must adhere to those requirements, because otherwise there is a risk of you being penalized by the authorities. So one has to be extremely careful and set up the internal system in such a way that the people who are involved directly or indirectly from the office do not trade in the stock which are being handled by the firm for the valuation exercise. Data secrecy is one of the most important aspect in this area, because you are given, say, future projections of a listed company which is not otherwise available in the public domain. So data secrecy is an extremely important quality you should develop within your organization, to make sure data is not shared with somebody or a competitor, and that is being kept in a most confidential way. Recently, nowadays, we have seen that most of the clients insisting for a non-disclosure agreement to be signed. That means you are also under contractual obligation to keep secret the data which you get from the client, and otherwise also as a moral obligation also, I think one should have this as a very clear practice in the firm. Many times we have seen, friends, clients will put an undue pressure on you to get a particular valuation. For example, if a promoter is merging his own company with a listed company which he is controlling, in the private company he may insist that I want a higher valuation, and in the listed company where he is holding say 60%, he may want to undervalue it. So there are many times pressures thrown on you to achieve a particular value. My humble suggestion to my young members will be that please do not accept such pressures, and if you are not convinced about a value, don't put a signature to something which you can't convince the outsider. The clients may go in that process, there you may lose some work, but ultimately in the long run you will create a goodwill which is far more valuable, far more important for you to develop this as a practice. So it is always better that when you are not convinced about a particular conclusion which the client wants, I think it is better to tell him very clearly that you are not in a position to conclude that way, and be clear, rather than signing something and taking up that work and then ultimately getting sort of questioned by a regulator or any authority. So it's always, we have seen it takes a number of years to create a goodwill, but if in one assignment the whole goodwill can be destroyed. So friends, be extremely careful in accepting any assignment which you are not convinced with. Keep a proper KYC norms in the firm in terms of accepting a quality of client, and also see that you don't end up doing some work which ultimately gets knocked down by a regulator. Finally, to conclude, friends, I want to just mention it to my young friends that when you are called upon to do a valuation, you don't have to look at only your client's interest and do a valuation with a very blinded eyes. You must look at the overall objective, because if public at large is involved, or if a regulator is involved, for example, if you are doing a valuation for a transfer pricing, your obligation is not only to your client, your obligation is also to the regulator, to the tax authorities. So try to be as fair as possible, because Once you are fair and once you feel that what you are doing is fair, you don't have to fear about any authority, because then you can with confidence get up and convince any party who questions your valuation and state that this is valuation is carried out using certain sound principles, and it is not done only with a particular objective to achieve a high or low value. I wish all my young members a very good luck in their career, and in case of any difficulty in this subject, I'll be more than happy to guide any of my young friends. Thank you very much. I am Sujal Shah, Chartered Accountant.